Hello. Good. Well, here we are, another week, and this will be the fourth lockdown live event. Wonder how many more we've got to do. Um, well, just a disclaimer first, because now we're going to talk about everything sleep related. This isn't individualised medical advice, obviously, because it's such an individual issue. It's more for education purposes, and everyone can get out of it what they can. We'll have plenty of time for questions afterwards. Got quite a lot to go through. One good thing about having all this time on our hands, I've spent a lot of time this week going through this ready for this evening, so I think we've got quite some interesting stuff to talk about. But first, just while everyone's coming in, let's have a quick quiz. See who's the first to get these. Let's have a couple of sleep references, popular sleep references. First one's an easy one. I'm not going to sing it, but "Hello, darkness, my old friend." There's that reference from. "Hello, darkness, my old friend." Oh. Now we've got "I sleep like a baby. I wake every hour." That's a bit tougher. That's comedian Billy Crystal. And a really nice one here. I'm going to give you this one. I'm going to give you this one from Charlotte Bronte. "A ruffled mind makes a restless pillow." These are things that are so true. And W.C. Fields, "The best cure for insomnia is a good night's sleep." I like that one. But now this, indulge me for a moment. I really love this quote. I think it really sums up sleep so well. It's from Shakespeare, and I think 400 odd years ago he nailed it. "Sleep that knits up the ravell'd sleeve of care, the death of each day's life, sore labour's bath, balm of hurt minds, great nature's second course, chief nourisher in life's feast." I just think that's just a wonderful, wonderful summing up of sleep. So let's get into it. Oh, good. We've got like the Bronte one. Thank you for that, Andrew. We've all heard that we need 8 hours for good, refreshing sleep. But this is absolutely true and critical. It really is. If you're routinely only getting 6 or 7 hours, there's a decrease in immune function, and inadequate sleep, even for a week, will increase your chance of being diagnosed with pre-diabetes, and it will also increase weight gain. Unfortunately, sleep loss is an epidemic in industrialised nations now. Diet and exercise are obviously really vital to good health, and everyone knows that, but sleep is even more important and probably more neglected because we think we can get away with it. A lack of sleep, like a lack of food, will cause death. It's that simple. And there are two main things to consider: when to be awake and when to be asleep. And looking at things through that lens of evolution, which I like to do, it's interesting to know that there are very much morning people and evening people. And it sort of makes sense, because if the whole tribe slept at the same time for 8 hours, then they'd be vulnerable for 8 hours. So if our body rhythms are slightly different and we go to sleep slightly earlier, then we'll be protected over a longer period of time. We've got two main processes to achieve this, which work independently of one another, but they both need to be attended to. The first is our own internal 24-hour clock, the circadian rhythm. Interestingly, I hadn't realised this, the word circa means around, which sort of makes sense with circus, etc. And dian is a derivative of the Latin for day. So the rhythm is around a day, and it is, because it's a little over 24 hours and 15 minutes, so it's not a precise 24-hour rhythm. But it's got a fabulous reset switch, which can happen every day, and that's light. So sunlight will keep us back in that 24-hour scale. There's a nucleus in the brain called the suprachiasmatic nucleus, which sits above where the two optic nerves cross one another, and it picks up small sources of light, and that can just help reset our body clock and get us back on track again. The circadian rhythm also drops our temperature before sleep, which ideally we want our core temperature between 16 degrees and no less than 12.5 degrees. So the second one, we've got the circadian rhythm. The second one is a chemical sleep, and it's sleep pressure. So the longer we awake, the more this chemical, it's called adenosine, it builds up, and the sleepier we become. And adenosine comes from our energy molecule, ATP, adenosyl triphosphate. So the energy we expend, more adenosine becomes available. So it's fantastic. So exercise does help sleep. And those feedback loops are just fascinating. So that builds up during the day, and it's that build-up that makes us feel sleepy. But caffeine will block out adenosine. It will take the receptor space up and not allow any more of the adenosine to build up. After ingesting any caffeine, its peak concentration is about 30 minutes afterwards, but its half-life, that's the time for half of its concentration to be broken down, is a whopping 5 to 7 hours. So half of that mid-morning coffee is still in your system up to 7 hours later. So say on average a cup of coffee has 96 milligrams of caffeine. At least 5 hours later, it'll have about 48 milligrams. 5 after that, 24 milligrams. You see where it's going. And decaf isn't necessarily the answer, as that contains 15 to 30% caffeine anyway. Tea in general has half the caffeine concentration of coffee. The longer it's brewed, the more caffeine. So it's the same pathway that's affected. I mean, it's a beautiful system, caffeine notwithstanding. As once the adenosine peaks and we fall asleep, sleep itself will break down the adenosine, and that takes 8 hours. So if you get less sleep than that, then you already have too high amount of adenosine to start off with. So you won't wake up feeling refreshed, because that leftover adenosine is making you feel drowsy. So then you have a cup of coffee to enliven you, wake you up, which will knock out the adenosine. You feel enlivened, but then as the coffee breaks down, the adenosine comes flooding back in, you start to feel sleepy, have another coffee, and so it begins. So it's a negative feedback loop we don't want to get into. Now, I'm sure most people have heard of melatonin. It's the renowned sleep hormone. People take it as a supplement to help with sleep, and although it's not available over the counter in this country, it's still readily available. However, it's not regulated, and the amount of melatonin in these supplements can be massively under or massively overstated. And interestingly, melatonin itself doesn't generate sleep. It's essentially a signpost signaling the onset of sleep to our body, but it doesn't actually generate it. So melatonin itself should start being produced at dusk, when natural light sort of descends into darkness until sleep is initiated. And then the melatonin production gradually falls down until the dawn, when light then hits the pineal gland and all production stopped. So essentially we're solar powered. But our modern way of living affects this process dramatically and critically because of electric lights, for a start. So melatonin is important in sleep schedule, but doesn't actually generate it, which is why it doesn't always work for everybody. Some people will swear by it, so they just need their signposts. So we'll look a bit later at the things that will build up that melatonin for you. And now the whole melatonin pathway itself is really interesting, because there are tryptophan-rich foods, which is dairy, seafood, meats, poultry, beans, hummus, lentils, nuts, eggs, sesame seeds. And that tryptophan, which is the amino acid from those foods, is converted into something called 5-HTP. 5-HTP is 5-hydroxytryptophan, and that conversion, 5-HTP, then goes to serotonin, which gets converted to melatonin. But this is the important bit. The tryptophan to 5-HTP, that conversion is taking place in the gut by the very same things we talked about last week. It all ties in together. It's beautiful. A healthy gut microbiome. So looking after our gut microbiome from last week is absolutely critical in starting the sleep schedule. 5-HTP being the precursor to serotonin, which is also the happy hormone. And that, as I said, is a precursor to melatonin. The 90% of serotonin is made in the gut. 5-HTP is converted to serotonin under the influence of B6, zinc, and magnesium. And sometimes one of these might need to be considered. Then, when you've got that serotonin, that needs to be converted to melatonin under the influence of B5. B5 is also critical in the production of energy for the body. And that's the whole B5 adenosine cycle, which is really, really interesting. That whole continuum carries on. So to boost melatonin production, naturally, we want to consume high tryptophan foods and consider probiotics, prebiotics, B6, zinc, magnesium, and B5. They're all the considerations for that particular part of the pathway. But, as always, and here we hark back to a couple of weeks ago when we talked about inflammation of the immune system. If you are inflamed because of the food you're eating, because of infections, because of toxins, because of sleep, ironically, because of stress or obesity, any of those things, if you are inflamed, you don't convert tryptophan effectively through to that 5-HTP, to the 5-hydroxytryptophan. And therefore, it doesn't go on to make the melatonin, so therefore we don't get our signposting to sleep. It shifts that process down into something called glutamate, which is a neuroexcitatory pathway, something that wakes our brain up and keeps us alert and anxious. Absolutely not what we want to be doing when we're sleeping. And if you remember the things we talked about a few weeks ago, it was removing the bad foods, the foods, the infections, toxicity, etc., and ensuring that the immune system has got what it requires to function properly, not over or under react. So things there to consider with vitamin D, magnesium, and often with sleep issues, it's glycine. It's something that's very under considered, I think, in lots of people, when most people run a 10 to 12 gram deficit of glycine. So if it's appropriate for you, if it's one of the things that could be useful, 5 grams of glycine before you go to bed can be very helpful, and that can be increased if necessary. It's anti-inflammatory and neuroinhibitory, so it calms everything back down again, switches it off. So, two main phases of sleep. We've got REM and NREM. REM, probably all heard about, is the rapid eye movement. NREM, now you have to focus closely on this, it's non-rapid eye movement. And NREM, again, they've got really, really ingenious with the nomenclature here. NREM's got 4 stages. NREM 1, 2, 3 and 4. And it's NREM 3 and 4, which is our deep, non-dreaming sleep. That's our slow wave sleep. And that's the other critical part of that sleep pathway. So REM sleep, our rapid eye movement sleep, is critical in emotional processing, creativity, short-term memory. There was a famous physician in Switzerland in the 16th century, Paracelsus, and he's quoted as saying, "From time immemorial, artistic insights have been revealed to artists in their sleep and in their dreams, so that at all times they ardently desire them." And this stuff has been known for 400 or 500 years, yet it's still apparently new but being proven now, which is quite nice. So that occurs in the REM sleep, the REM sleep. It sort of takes different pieces of information from various parts of the brain, links them together, and that's where the creativity comes and the problem solving comes, as the brain is linking apparently random stuff together and putting it all together. And then the NREM sleep, that will store and learn what's been processed. It's essentially like the warehouse for ordering all the information and putting it to the appropriate areas in the brain. So we need both parts of it, very, very much so. Unfortunately, alcohol majorly disrupts REM sleep. Alcohol will prevent the storage and learning by about 50%, and even a few days later. And this is a really sad thing for students. So say, for example, a student had an exam on Monday. They start studying for it on Thursday beforehand, not the night before, which is very good. And have no alcohol for a couple of days because I'm studying, I'm focusing. Then Saturday night, yeah, I've done all that study, let's go out for a couple of drinks. They can lose 40% of their learned memory from that one alcohol disrupted night of sleep. And it doesn't have to be very much, 40%. That's, tragic if you're a student in that stage. So even small amounts of alcohol will directly affect that REM sleep. It is that sensitive to it. You might think having alcohol actually helps sleep and you get off sleep better and deeper. It's not the case. It's the same as sedation. You're knocking yourself out, essentially. You don't get the quality of the restorative benefits with alcohol-induced sleep. Your body won't get the REM sleep because as the alcohol starts to break down, it'll produce things called aldehydes and ketones, and they'll directly inhibit those REM sleep waves. And then we're more likely to have to get up tonight to avoid your bladder, which further disrupts and fragments the sleep. So the effects of alcohol, and this is a lot to go through, I know, and we'll get to all the questions. The effects of alcohol in pregnancy, that's well documented. I think we all know this now. But I found this really interesting and mildly terrifying, that if a pregnant woman has 2 glasses of wine, it will decrease their baby's REM movements from a healthy 381 movements per hour to just 4. And that literally is a sobering thought. It really is. And when breastfeeding, alcohol levels in the mother's breast milk is the same as that in the bloodstream. And that will actually cause fragmented sleep for their baby as well. So REM sleep in the developing fetus and babies literally builds a fabric of their brain via synaptogenesis. It's a way where those synapses join together. So any disruption to it, the baby's got to play catch up the whole time. Anyway, interesting, going back to the melatonin circadian rhythm again. Those within the autistic spectrum, they have a weaker rhythm and a flatter profile of melatonin across a 24-hour period. So instead of having a big high and then a rapid drop, it's much flatter and more even curve, which isn't ideal to signal for sleep, and it isn't ideal for starting that process off. And unfortunately, this group of people tend to have 30 to 50% less REM sleep. So it's something else that it's a consideration. Children and adolescents, their brain maturation occurs during NREM sleep, the deep cycles, and this is what caffeine will disturb. For this group, they shouldn't be consuming any caffeine whatsoever, none. By late 40s, we lose approximately 60 to 70% of our deep NREM sleep compared to teenagers, and by 70, about 80 to 90%. This makes it absolutely critical for older people to maximise their deep NREM sleep. Natural sunshine in both the morning and the afternoon can help to really stimulate that on-off melatonin function. The more natural light you get in the day, the less disruptive artificial light will become in the evening. It almost leaves no extra room for that light to come in. We've topped our levels up enough. The NREM phase lasts approximately 90 minutes, with a high proportion of NREM, the deep non-dream sleep, in the earlier parts of the sleep, and the high proportion of the REM sleep towards the end of the 8-hour cycle. But they're sandwiched, so you'll have a small bit of REM, large NREM, small bit of REM at the beginning, opposite towards the end. Another fascinating fact is that, I think it's fascinating, is that the brain automates skills and movements during sleep. So if you're trying to learn a new skill, a new movement, your brain will allow you to master that movement more, but that takes place in the final 2 hours of sleep. So if you only have 6 hours of sleep, missing out on your ability to master functional movements, missing out on that quality REM dream sleep for emotional processing and creativity, problem solving. So if you get up earlier in the morning to get things done and go and do what you need to do for your day, that's fine, but only if you've accounted for it at the front end of your sleep. Those final 2 hours are crucial, they really are. If you get less than 6 hours of sleep per night, your physical exhaustion increases by 10 to 30%, which is fairly self-explanatory. Your aerobic output is significantly reduced, and there's a 50% increase of injury potential compared to those getting their 8 hours. So it's so important for injury repair as well, so for the recovery. If you were going to pull an all-nighter, it's going to give you 400% increase in the number of microsleeps the next day, when your eyes momentarily close, which obviously relates to a much higher level of accidents and injuries. But that's if you pull an all-nighter, you think, okay, well, put that to one side. If you had 10 days of just 6 hours sleep, it has exactly the same outcome, a 400% increase. Sleep debt is cumulative. It really is. I know I'm probably labouring this a little bit, and you want to know, I know all this, but what can I do about it? I am getting to that, but I think it's so important to realise how absolutely vital those 8 hours are, especially those people who think they sleep fine and don't have a problem with 6 hours sleep. Oh, I'm fine, 6 hours sleep, not a problem, I can get up and do what I need to do. Problem is, when you're sleep deprived, you don't know you're sleep deprived. And if you're only having 6 hours, you are. I'm afraid that's a given. There is a difference, though, from being sleep deprived and insomnia. Insomnia is the inability to generate sleep despite allowing adequate opportunity, 8 to 9 hours. And sleep deprived is having adequate ability to sleep, but inadequate opportunity. So to get your 8 hours, you need to give yourself 8.5 to 9 hours sleep opportunity. So say you're planning on waking at 7 a.m, you need to be in bed, getting ready to sleep about 10 p.m. Then there's a paradoxical insomnia where someone believes they've had a poor night's sleep, when in fact they haven't. That's not always the case. In fact, last week in the garden with that lovely weather, we sat out there, we had some music on there, and a little shut eye there, and she said, "Oh, a nice sleep, did you?" And I didn't fall asleep, I heard every song. She goes, "You did," because you were snoring and I've moved out twice in that room. So sometimes we can be so adamant, well, I definitely didn't sleep, I was just resting my eyes. But it's interesting that paradoxical insomnia. So insomnia itself can be broken down into onset insomnia and maintenance insomnia, so getting to sleep or staying asleep. The triggers for this, and some are poor genetics, bright lights, temperatures, caffeine, tobacco, alcohol, stress, medication side effects, inflammation. But chronic insomnia, that tends to have a strong psychological component based on emotional concerns and worry, which will then stimulate the classic fight or flight response, which we spoke about again a few weeks ago. This will activate the sympathetic nervous system, which will increase your blood pressure, increase your heart rate, increase your metabolic rate, and that will thus increase your temperature and cortisol, and therefore your alertness, the complete opposite of what we want to generate sleep. So here the exercises we talked about previously was the hummingbird and CV4 exercise. These will help to encourage a parasympathetic state. Obviously addressing the worries and concern is also a big factor. In studies they've found that CBTI, which is cognitive behavioural therapy for insomnia, is specific, and that's been proven quite effective. It doesn't happen overnight though. If you've been chronically stuck in fight or flight, it takes a while for your body to reset. Keep doing the exercises and the stress reduction techniques. Look at stress management. Consider magnesium, choline, adrenal support, the adaptogens, ginseng, ashwagandha. With insomnia and the increased sympathetic nervous system tone, it lowers quality and duration of sleep. So you get the less powerful deep sleep, you get fragmented REM sleep. So it just will affect every system of the body. The industrial area really has affected our sleep quality and potential for sleep significantly, but these are modern benefits we will take for granted. Constant electric lights, they artificially disturb our circadian rhythms by fooling the brain into thinking it's daytime when it should be darkness. So it delays the production of melatonin to start with. The suprachiasmatic nucleus is extremely sensitive to light. Sleep onset insomnia, it takes a while for melatonin to increase once the lights are out. So if you're only turning all your lights out when you want to sleep, melatonin levels won't be high enough to point to signposts and point us into the direction of sleep. Even low-level light has an effect on fooling the brain into thinking it's daylight. Blue LED and iPad light stimulates that massively and decreases melatonin by between 23 and 50%. This then delays the melatonin for the next night, so we get like a digital hangover. Regulated temperature. With central heating, all our homes are often at standard ambient temperature. We need to experience a drop in temperature in order to sleep. If the temperature is too high, our melatonin is too low. It works both on light and temperature. So temperature regulation itself, it isn't passive. We can actively reduce our core temperature. We radiate heat away from our head, our feet and our hands. There's lots of blood vessels there which jettison our heat. So warm feet and hands will encourage the body's core temperature to drop. It's also why a hot bath can be helpful. As all the heat is then brought to the surface and dissipates away from the core. People often think it's because they're all warm and cosy after a bath. That's why they sleep better. But no, it's because it's taking the blood away from the core and it's cooling it down, and that's what we need. Consumption of tea, coffee, chocolate, as we've mentioned, massive, hugely detrimental, and blocks adenosine from building up. Don't start me on Red Bull and so-called energy drinks. They should be outlawed. Consumption of alcohol, it's increasing, especially in the Western world here. Even a small amount will adversely affect your sleep pattern, like we said. It gives the impression of sleeping well, but like sleeping pills, it's just a sedative. And as it's broken down into the aldehydes and ketones, directly prevent your REM sleep. Talking of sleeping pills, they're actually being shown to increase mortality rate by 4 to 6 times. So you don't get the proper nourishing sleep. So you don't get your immune system sort of reset and strengthened again. And that leads to potential to infection, which is why the mortality rate is higher, but also to things like road traffic accidents when you're tired. And alarm clocks, not waking up naturally with the dawn light. We're being jolted out of sleep. Ideally, when we're sleeping well, we wake up before the alarm. And then when that happens, it's a lovely feeling. You think, oh, look, I've woken up and the alarm's not due to go off for another 5 minutes. Great feeling. Love that. But that should be the norm. We've been stimulated out of sleep, so we're missing that last part of the REM sleep. So, take a breath. Let's just consolidate on that. It's a lot to take in, I know, but I think it's important to get a grasp of how important it is, what it is, and what we can do to improve it. And then we'll have a look at and see all these questions, and so I'll look at those in just a sec. So, ideally, our sleep schedule should be the same 7 days a week. Bed at the same time, arise at the same time, including weekends. It's the best routine which is going to help the circadian rhythms. It really is an important one. How many of us do that? I don't know, but it's something to consider, especially if you're having an issue with it. Especially if you've got time at the moment. Give yourself that chance to build a really, really good healthy habit in doing things like that. Exercise, but not within 2 or 3 hours of sleep. The more energy you expend, the more your body will need to rest, and the more adenosine is liberated from that ATP or energy molecule because of that exercise. Avoid caffeine and nicotine. No, those are given. Avoid alcohol. Unless the pub opens first thing in the morning, the body has a chance to break it down, but we're probably not going to advocate that one. Avoid large meals at night. All your blood will rush to the gut to try and digest it, and it raises your core temperature, and with all the metabolic functions going on, it's not going to help it. If possible, try and avoid sleeping tablets. They don't generate good sleep, cause sedation, so you don't get that quality sleep we're after. If you're a nap person, try not to have one after 3 p.m. They can be really good earlier than that, can be helpful. A little power nap, 20 minutes, no longer than that. Because otherwise you'll be breaking down that adenosine that's so carefully built up. Try and relax before bed. Don't overschedule your day. That's getting us into then more of a parasympathetic mode, reversing that fight or flight reaction of the day, that sympathetic nervous system drive. A hot bath before going to bed gives you the cools the core temperature down. A dark, cool, gadget-free bedroom. No iPads and blue light. No good. Sunlight exposure. Get as much as you can regularly. It helps to regulate our circadian rhythm, as we've said. It will strengthen the peak and trough of melatonin production, and it will increase our vitamin D production, which is critical in the anti-inflammatory immune pathways. Turn off your Wi-Fi at night. There's evidence to suggest that the EMFs, the electromagnetic frequencies from Wi-Fi, can disturb our sleep waves, which sort of makes sense. An interesting one, some people seem to be energetically incompatible with their sleep partners. This is obviously important for obvious reasons and not an easy one to deal with. It tends to go back to the fight or flight response that we're in high alert, that's being triggered by something from the other person. It could be an odour, a smell, it could be a linking of a facial expression to a previous negative experience. Many things it could be. Meditating together can be helpful. Obviously, if you can find the actual trigger, that will be hugely beneficial. You can use the fast technique that we talked about a few weeks ago as well. There's some evidence that Reiki can actually be quite helpful for this as well, probably again by inducing more of a parasympathetic response. CBT can be useful. It's trying to apply all the strategies that we've mentioned, but to both sleep partners. Inflammation itself, we've covered that a lot over the weeks. Bad food zone. The melatonin pathway can be massively influenced by inflammation. So everything we've talked about last week is very relevant here. We want that good gut microbiome. We want to avoid those foods that tend to disturb us mostly. Consider vitamin D, consider magnesium, and especially glycine at night. Allergy, if you're an allergic type person, histamine release can certainly disturb sleep. And it's sometimes a tricky one to discover, from allergenic as opposed to hypoallergenic pillows, to washing powder, to scented candles, to pet hairs or dust mites. If you're of an allergic disposition, try and find those triggers as much as you can and remove them. Look at decreasing your reactivity by focusing more on your gut health again. The better the gut, the less reactive you'll be, because you're less inflamed, less reactive, so that cycle goes on again. Natural antihistamines like quercetin, vitamin C and zinc can also be helpful there. In Chinese medicine, there's something called the horary clock, which shows that energy shifts through the meridian system every 2 hours. So if somebody wakes up at a certain time, regularly, it's always between that time, it could be potentially due to a dysfunction in that area. The common ones are liver, that's between 1 and 3 a.m. So if somebody's always waking up, always wake up at 2:30, you're thinking, is there a dysfunction in there? Is there a toxicity? Is there something going on liver-wise that needs to be looked at? And then find out what that is and clear it if needs be. That milk thistle can be useful there. If they're waking regularly between 3 and 5 a.m., that's lung time. That's a common time for potential allergies to cause problems as well. So that would be another indicator that possibly that's some way there. And sometimes zinc, copper and vitamin C can be quite useful there. Blood sugar. Now this is massively important. If your blood sugar is not stable, there's a direct hormonal effect in your body which will stop the sleep. It's simple as that. The high tryptophan food, turkey, cottage cheese, chicken, eggs, fish, seeds, peanut butter, hummus, take with a little bit of carbohydrate like rice crackers before bed can help stabilise that blood sugar. For some people, they might need to consider magnesium or chromium just to help with that stabilisation effect. For some chronic insomniacs, there's a condition known as viral-induced insomnia, and that's commonly caused by Epstein-Barr virus. Not always, but just commonly. So that would be very much part of the infection, part of the inflammatory precursors we've previously spoken about. Meditation again, consider headspace to switch off that fight or flight response. There are some herbs that can be helpful in relaxing prior to bed. Again, trying to get into a parasympathetic resting state. We don't want to be a sedative state, we want to be switching off naturally. So valerian is very commonly used. It's got quite a lot of research to help with that one. White lettuce is another one quite good. Passiflora, lavender, and more recently, CBD oil has come onto the market. A lot of people have been using it, and that's been quite good. Again, that helps to balance all of the different systems as well. So that can be quite a useful one. Not with THC, just with the CBD. I know there's quite a lot of things to take in here, and I'm going to produce a resource sheet and put it onto the website over the coming few days. I think there's some good things to go through, rather than sit there with a notepad and try and write these things down. There's many sorts of potential aids that affect the sleep, both negatively and positively. I think glycine is probably one of the most underappreciated but massively helpful, but again, it needs to be individualised. Is it right for you? There's lots of things that can point you in that direction. You need to find out what part of the cycle is breaking down and how you can influence it to optimum. That generally is about the sum of the things I wanted to say. It's quite a lot. It's quite it's really interesting. It's a fascinating subject, but so important, and we just don't have enough of it. we've got to get those 8 hours. It's critical. So I'm just going to have a quick look through the questions now. There's a few there. Oh, hi John Beanie and Sandy. Hello. Hello Lisa back again. And do you manage to find it live this time? Andrew Pettifer, hi. Dark room. Simon, oh, thank you, Paul. Simon Garfunkel, got it. Yeah. Maybe it came through a little bit later. Any advice for painful knees, please? It might be arthritis. Slightly different to sleep side of things, but nearly always inflammation. We did a video on this a couple of weeks back, so maybe have a look at that, because the arthritis, it tells you there's an inflammation of the joint there. So it's trying to find that inflammatory part. Hi Jessica, Jackie, hi. Oh, Karen, hello. Jim, Tammy, well, made it this week, Tammy, good, well done. And Sue again, lovely. My mum, 8 hours sleep, what's that? Yeah, well, this is for you as well then. Lucid dreaming. Yeah, well, that can be a good sign of some decent REM sleep. But Ella, if I get 8 hours plus, I still can't wake up to my alarms. I have to have 13 alarms. Is there a reason for this, or am I just broken? Right, that was suggested. That's not right. No, you're probably sticking too much in the NREM sleep and not enough of the REM sleep. So you need to be looking at the things that we just spoken about that's going to help with the REM side of things there. Hello. Got no luck in sleeping during the lockdown then from Anne. Thank you, Ray. Ha ha. Yeah, so from Ella here, there's clearly a massive issue there. So spend a couple of weeks, Ella, if you can, going through those things. Go to bed at 10 o'clock, 9 o'clock, set your alarm, get up at that time. Get yourself into a habit of waking and sleeping at a scheduled time. Abby, it's hard to get when I've had out. Yeah, that again, because you've got the deep sleep, and you'll probably be missing previously. There's a sleep debt pattern there as well, so you're missing some of the really helpful sleep at the end. Yeah, again, a lot of people say about 6 hours. No, it's not good. Emma's, but I looked on Amazon for glycine, wasn't sure which one to get. Had lots of slum. Good, that's good. Yeah, I would definitely think for you, Emma, there, that would be useful. I'll send you the link to one that has been quite good. I use epigenetics a lot for it, but if you're using higher doses, the powder tends to be a little bit easier. Peter with the Zs, thank you. How long before bed should we stop looking at iPhones? That's a really good question, Lloyd. So, ideally, as it comes to dusk, that's when the natural light goes down, melatonin starts going up. Any unnatural light before then, after then, will disrupt it. So, the further away from sleep time you can get away from your iPhones and iPads, the better. So, you're looking at a couple of hours, really, ideally. I know that's not always practical. My mum never used an alarm, can't wake up at the same time every morning. That's good. That really is good. Somebody's put some of these into an order. Thanks for that. What's the latest time you would have dinner? That's another really good question. And ideally, it's the old adage is breakfast like a king, supper like a pauper. So your big meal first thing in the morning, and then gradually you decrease the amount you're eating throughout the day. So your smaller meal will be in the evening. But saying that, we need to regulate the blood sugar overnight as well. So you don't 3 hours before is so if you're going to bed at 10, 7's okay. So I need to put those in. Thank you. Hot flushes keep me awake for hours. Any ideas, please? Lots there, Jackie. We'd be looking at the inflammation again there. Menopausal hot flushes is another whole subject. Maybe we might do a lockdown on that. Yeah, that's slightly different. I'll speak to you about that differently. Jackie's my sister. Aromatherapy, yeah, aromatherapy can be really helpful. Again, getting to that parasympathetic switching off mode. Lavender in particular has been used a lot. We've got that. Waking Barrier for perimenopause, okay. I think we definitely need to do one on menopausal side of things. In that case, that'd look like a pattern, because that's the whole. About the liver and the whole hormone pathway. Liver breakdown takes place at hormone breakdowns take place at the liver and gut mostly. So we want to make sure you're breaking down effectively. If you're not, then you're increasing that, increasing the activity through the liver there. Hot flushes too, also on tamoxifen, which side effects of medication. That's very true, Risa. Tamoxifen, it does affect sleep there, and it's a tricky one. So you will be looking at all the things you can manage there, which is the diet, the good gut microbiome, getting that nice and strong. I think hot flushes is definitely one to do, maybe for next week. I could do this to sleep. Well, that's a young baby Mel as well. That has definitely an effect. But, hey Alex, that's good for that. So yeah. Carol says nice haircut. Yes, I have my lockdown haircut thanks to Julie. She did a very good job. Right. One talk do from Argos or M&S. I haven't done a relative comparison between the Argos and M&S, am I? Right. Okay, so is that everything for the time being? It looks like one on menopausal hot flush type thing could be quite useful then. Seems to be a few people mentioned that then, because I think it's a whole other topic again. Okay, lovely, great. Well, thanks everybody. I can't use Messenger at the moment. For some reason, Facebook and all their wisdom have banned me until 12:31 tomorrow. So I'm not really sure why. But if you send me messages via Messenger, I can't reply till tomorrow, but on then, of course. And I'll try and get this into advice sheet and put it up on the website. Thanks all, and tune in next week.